Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2024 week 19. That is May 6th to May 12th. And we are kicking off right where we left off, and that is working on fixing the electrical plate to the car. So I've already welded the piece in. I'm just clamping the plate to the piece that I welded to the bar, drilling a hole for a bolt, and then I'll be putting that bolt in. In this video, we are continuing our thrash to get the car on the road. So there's just a ton of tiny little things we need to get working and get fixed. And, you know, one of these was mounting this electrical panel. Now that that is mounted, we can open this box of parts that I have, and this is fittings for the catch can lines. So in one of the previous videos, I didn't have enough fittings, I didn't have enough lines, so I couldn't make the lines to go off of the valve covers to the catch can, but now we have rectified that situation. So we are going to, I mean, you've seen me make hoses tons of times. This is no different. I'm just going to put some hose ends onto the valve covers. I'm going to run the line. I think on this side I run it on top of the heater core lines. I don't really remember exactly where it goes, but that's what we're going to do. We're just going to build and make all these lines. we have the passenger line done, we are moving over to the driver's side line. And this one takes a little bit more effort. I play around with the angles a little bit. I end up switching where I run the line. I'm going to end up running the line along with the upper radiator hose. It's actually a really good way to run it. It goes right into the catch can. I know it's going to clear the hood, so there's nothing wrong with that, but got to do it wrong before you can do it right. So you can see here, my initial thought was, 180 off the catch can, run it in behind the alternator over to that valve cover. But yeah, I just didn't like it. It's, getting in the way of the lines. There's not really a good way to run it. It's just kind of janky. So swapping this over, trying it with the rad hose is much, much nicer. Alright, so with those catch can lines done, as I said in this video, it's a lot of just small things trying to get the car on the road. There's a lot of things that need to happen. So I'm just taking a few seconds to ponder what the hell I'm going to do after these catch can lines, because I need to do something. right, so one thing that I need to do is I need to tie up the fuel lines to the chassis. Right now they're just kind of hanging loose in the wheel well. So I've got a couple of these weld on tabs, so I'm just going to clean them up, and then I'm going to weld these into the passenger side fender well, and then that's what I'm going to tie all of the electrical and all of the fuel lines up to. And I'm also going to just tie up the rest of the electrical to the chassis underneath the car here. And since we got the zip ties out, what the hell, let's just zip tie all this up. So what I got in the bag is a 3-inch 90-degree elbow, and this is going to be for my air filter. Now, this is way too long. It's sticking out quite a bit. The filter is just way too long as well. So I'm going to take it over to the bench and cut it down. Now that it's cut down, what I need to do is I need to put a little end on there for the hose clamp to attach to. So I'm going to pull out my bead rolling tool, and it is kind of janky. The pipe's at a bit of an angle. It's not liking it so much. Yeah, I mean, it worked in the end, but it was really kind of janky and whatever. I mean, it worked. I know I'm going to redo this pipe anyways, but for, you know, getting this on the road, that's the main goal. Right, so with that cut down, that seems to be about the right length, and without the fender on the car, I don't really know if the rest of this is going to work. As you can see, that hose or that silicone coupler is way too big. It's, you know, I got one for a 4-inch, and that's only a 3-inch pipe or a 3.5-inch pipe. So I'm going to need to switch out that coupler at some point, but not today. Alright, so now the brake line going from the driver's side to the passenger side is loose along the frame, our K-member, so we're just going to add some zip ties and just tie that up. Alright, so we're going to throw the wheels back in the car, in my mind, hopefully for the last time, for a while at least. right here, I'm just, doing a very, very crude camber on the car, trying to get the wheels at least pointed, vertically as best I can. The car will have to go in for an alignment, but for a few rips around the block, I want to just kind of try and get this somewhat straight. I also don't want to drop the car down. The suspension's going to collapse and bend inward, so having this cambered out is preferable to cambered in at this point. But again, this is just very crude, get me on the road and going up and down the road type of stuff here. Well, we might as well do the same crude and janky setup on the other side. Well, with that, let's do a little tiny bit of cleanup here. Alright, next up on the block is we are going to put a dipstick in. So I've tried a couple of times to use the Canton pan specific dipsticks, neither of them worked. So I'm going to reuse this Ford Racing dipstick tube that I've had for a while. It just pushes into the block in the stock location and uses one of the bolts on the header to hold it in. And this way I'm not going to be shooting oil out of the block, out of the dipstick tube, hopefully. Although in theory, there shouldn't be any pressure in there, considering I'm venting the valve covers to the catch can. But whatever, we need to do it, so let's do it. And what I realized as I'm putting this on, the bracket, I guess, that attaches under the header is actually too fat, so I'll pull it out of there, take it over to the bench, put it in the vise, and I'll just grind it down to make it clear. And as always, you never hit it on the first try, so gotta, test fit and grind it down a bit more. All right, it's time to get this back down on its wheels. But before I do that, I remembered that I want to put these clamps on the exhaust. I don't really think it's going anywhere, but it's not going to hurt to have clamps on there. All right, back to dropping this down. And we get a visit from Carburetor and from Answer. Carburetor is the bigger brown one. Answer is the little black and white one. And after that quick visit, we can, what are we moving on to? Oh, right. So I initially tried dropping the front end down before the back end, but that doesn't work because the front end is so low. So I had to just drop the front end down a little bit, then drop the back end. Now I can drop the front end. Alright, since I was doing some welding on the car, I unplugged the ECU, so I'm just going ahead and plugging all the connectors back in. Obviously you can't see this, but that's what I was doing. Alright, so we are opening up the door because we want to get this running, just kind of test it and make sure everything's still working. So I'm just checking a few things, and then I'm just going to kind of throw the e-brake on, make sure I got power, and then I'm just going to roll the car back out of the shop. And then I'm going to get the car running here, and as the car is running, you're going to see a big black puff of smoke out the back. And holy crap, it sounded like a small bomb went off in the shop. There was a super loud backfire. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. I started the engine, everything was running just, you know, like normal. And then what I ended up realizing is I never connected the driver's side coil ground to the car. I looked at the wiring there and I was like, I don't need to connect those grounds, forgetting that one of the grounds was for the coils. So what was happening is I had the engine running, and the engine is putting gasoline into the cylinder because the 4 passenger side cylinders are firing. The engine was running. It wasn't running rough. It actually felt quite normal, which was odd. But because the engine was running on only the passenger 4 cylinders, it's still spitting gas into the driver's side on every rotation because it doesn't know that it's not firing. So it was just putting raw fuel all the way through the exhaust pipe. And then eventually, the raw fuel mixed with the exhaust coming out of the passenger side, which is going to be hot, or, the gas touched the header or, something like that. And it essentially created a miniature gas bomb at the back of the car and blew up. And it was freaking loud. I thought something, blew up in the exhaust. But yeah, so after reconnecting the coil, you can see I got the car running and, just checking things, making sure things are running, and just kind of doing a little bit of bass tuning. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I kind of do, but I really don't. So I'm just kind of playing around and, learning as I go here. So the car is running well enough. It's in a position where I think I can set up my phone, set up a couple cameras, and I'm just going to roll this thing back and forth under its own power, I think. I want to give the brakes a test, test the clutch, all that stuff. So I fire up the car, and one of the things I noticed is the clutch isn't really working as I would expect. I push it all the way to the floor, and I can't really get into reverse. It's really hard to go in, so it seems like the clutch isn't disengaging. But you know what? It rolled, it stopped. I was able to roll it back forward. It stopped. That was a huge break. Like, that was a huge thing that it moved back and forth under its own power. It stopped it and it ran. That's, 3 years worth of work, and it actually does something. I was pretty freaking excited for this. So now I was like, okay, what next? So one of the main things is the brakes aren't working. So what happens is I start the car. The brake pedal just essentially, you can push on it, it'll firm up for a split second, and then it'll just sink all the way down to the bottom. It'll just bottom out the master, and it's like, holy shit, what the fuck's going on? So just kind of playing around, see if I can, pump up the brakes, that sort of thing, and just kind of trying to get this thing figured out and, troubleshoot it and figure it out. And just, I don't really know. It's the first car I've ever built, so I'm honestly not entirely sure what I'm doing. All I know is that the brakes don't work, the clutch is kind of fucky, so that's what I got to focus on. So since the brakes aren't working, I'm just going to go under the car. I'm going to look at all the brakes. I'm going to look at the fittings and just kind of see what's going on. Is there air in the system? Is it leaking? That sort of thing. But I'm also going to do a little bit of tuning. I think I look at a data log, possibly. But just kind of make sure the car is doing what it's supposed to do. So since the brakes aren't working, what I'm doing is grabbing my power bleeder. I'm going to try and bleed these brakes more because, as I said, they're just not working. So I can do that while the computer's not doing anything. So just hooking up the power bleeder, and I'm going to bleed all the brakes. Just, you know, doesn't hurt to put more fluid through it. So with the front's rebled, we'll start the car, we'll hit the brakes, see if that did anything. Yeah, you might be able to tell from my reaction, but yeah, it didn't. I have no idea what the hell's going on. I got fluid, the reservoir's closed, I bled the brakes, I'm getting good fluid through it. Yeah, so I just gotta keep trying to figure it out, I guess. And with that, let's bleed some more brakes. Well, with the brakes bled, let's just hit the pedal. And of course, when I hit the pedal, I didn't have the cap on, so I shot brake fluid like 25 feet in the air and covered everything in the engine bay with brake fluid. So let's put the caps back on, and then I can try and hit the brake pedal. And now an inside shot of just rolling this thing back and forth. And I'm sad to report there was absolutely no change in the brakes. you know, I hit the brake pedal and it's solid for the first second or two, and then it just sinks right to the floor. So I'm going to jump out of the car, and I'm just going to see, like, is the booster holding vacuum? And yeah, you know, I moved the vacuum hose, and it was holding vacuum, so a booster seems like it's doing what it's supposed to do. But the brakes are not working. So something else I need to work on is the e-brake. So I'm just going to pull the e-brake up. I'm going to adjust it because I noticed the e-brake wasn't really doing much of anything. So I just want to, you know, get it adjusted up, and then hopefully it'll be able to hold the car. So here I'm just testing it, you know, e-brake off, good, e-brake on. I can still push and pull the car pretty easily, which is not good. So I'll just adjust this a bit more, see if I can get it to a point where it'll hold the car. And I could not get it to hold the car no matter how much I adjusted it. So I'm just going to leave that. And I noticed I had a fuel leak when I was at the back of the car. So I'm just tightening up all of the fittings just to get rid of that fuel leak. The last thing you want is fuel leaking, especially when your exhaust is right there pointing at it. And so yeah, here I'm just checking the e-brake with it all the way up just to see if, like, I'm fully extending out the cylinder for the e-brake. And it looks like I am. It looks like when I have that e-brake up that the arms all the way out. So I'm going to read the instructions and see how to adjust this. And the thing is, there were no instructions on how to adjust the e-brake. There's just nothing on it. There was nothing that covers it. So I got to figure this out on my own. Well, in order to work on the e-brake, you got to get the rear brakes off. So jack the car, get some jack stands under it, pull the wheels off, pull the calipers off, then we can pull the rotors off, and then we can access the brakes. All right, so as we pull the rotor off, right at the bottom there's this cylinder, and I notice right at the front of the cylinder there's what looks like a little almost wheel that should allow you to adjust the brake shoes out. And I try to adjust it just with it on the car, and it's not really doing much. So what I'm going to do is, I remember the other side definitely pops out of that out of the cylinder. So I'm just trying to get the adjuster worked out so that I can adjust it out. And so that's what I'm working on, is getting that little adjuster piece out. So in order to get the adjuster out, I gotta undo the brake shoes from its mount, drop that down, and then I can get the adjuster out. So with the adjuster popped out of there, I'm trying to figure out how this works, because most of them I know it'll just spin, but this is not spinning at all. It's just it's tight, it's not doing anything, so I'm just trying to figure this out. So I'm just going to go over the device, place it in there very gently, and with some channel locks I'm going to see if I can't twist the top part of this either one way or the other. And yeah, as it turns out I could. So there you go. That's all you got to do, is you just got to loosen that piece off, and then you can adjust this. So I knew that the e-brake was very loose, so I'm going to put this in there, and I'm just going to adjust it out a bit, so I don't really do this too scientifically. But I just adjust it out a bit, and then I put it all back together. And then I will do the same thing on the other side, test the e-brake, see how it works, and we will revisit it. yeah, we're just redoing the exact same process on the other side. Pull it all apart, get that adjuster out, adjust it out. Well, on this side, I do it a little bit scientifically where I count how many times I back it off. And I believe I go back to the other side, readjust it all the way in, and then readjust it out the same amount. But I needed the other side kind of adjusted so I could work on adjusting this side. Maybe I lied and I don't go back to the other side. I just call it good enough. But I am going to adjust the e-brake, and I mean that seems to be fine. And I'm going to pull the front wheels off, and I'm going to try rebleeding this system again because, you know, the brakes still aren't working. So if there's no visible leaks, there's really nothing else you can do other than, you know, rebleed all the brakes again. So same process, start with the furthest away, back right, go to the back left, go to the front right, go to the front left, and hope for the best. that they've all been rebled, jump back in the car, start it, test the brakes, and same exact thing happens. Okay, not sure what else to do at this point. But when in doubt, look at the tune, make some changes to something that you can change and make better. I was wondering why it was kind of running kind of shitty. It was trying to add a bunch of fuel. Oh, that's why. My fuel was so low that the pump wasn't pumping enough, and so it was pretty lean and trying to add a bunch of fuel. So that's something to look out for. If you're leaning out randomly, check your fuel pressure. If your fuel pressure's low, check your gas. You might be running out. Alright, now that we put some gas in the car, we can get back to trying to learn how to tune this thing. So what I'm looking at is, that was kind of the main fuel table I was looking at. And the way it works is your engine is just a big old air pump. You have air coming through it, you add fuel to it, you can press it, you light a spark and blow it up, and that's what sends your piston down. So I'm using a method that's called volumetric efficiency. So your engine is only going to be so efficient. It's not 100% filled with air, like the cylinders aren't 100% filled with air. So I'm just trying to tell the computer how efficient the engine is being at any given point in time. That's my understanding of it, at least. Now, that could be very wrong because, again, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyways. Alright, well, the engine starts and idles pretty well, so with it being stationary, there's really not a whole lot else I can do right now with it. So we're moving back to these brakes, because man, the brakes are pissing me off. So what I'm doing right now is I'm taking the master off of the booster, and I'm just going to re-measure the push rod coming out of the booster to make sure that it's not preloading the master at all. I'm just going to double check this because I'm having issues with the brakes, and that's one thing that I can very easily check without pulling all the brake lines off. So now I got this kind of apart. What I want to do is force the brake pedal down. So I just grabbed this broom and I force it to push the brake pedal all the way down and hold it down, and that will allow me to measure how far out that push rod is coming from the face of the booster, and then from there I can measure how deep the piston hole is inside the master cylinder and make sure that I'm not preloading the master at all, so making sure that the rod's not going to be pushing out on it at all, and also making sure I've got full travel. So just taking some measurements, and if I recall correctly, everything was good there. It may have been a little bit too long, but it really wasn't anything crazy that would have been causing the issues that I'm having. With this done, you know, with the way the brake pedal is acting, it seems like air's getting into the system, and it seems like that's why the brake pedal is just sinking to the floor. So I'm, you know, grabbing my power bleeder this time just to try a different style of bleeding, see if any of that'll work, because I'm in my mind I'm thinking I need to bleed the brakes. So that's what we're gonna see if I have anything that's gonna work with this Bear Master. And unfortunately, I do not have anything that works with this specific master. So I just go back to vacuum bleeding and trying to get some more fluid through the system. So at this point in time, I've gotten a ton of fluid through this system, so we're just going to fire up the car and see if it works. But of course, I hit the brake pedal without putting the cap on, so I shot brake fluid up another, 20 feet in the air again. So clean that up a little bit, and then we'll just quickly test this. Brakes feel good without the car running, so I'm happy with it. But yeah, as soon as I start running the car, the brakes just go straight to the floor. And I kind of figured here, since I spilt brake fluid all over the windshield, I should, clean it up as best I can. And then, instead of hard cleaning up the windshield because it was filthy, let's just continue cleaning it, throw some Windex on there, clean it inside and out. So yeah, time to throw the tires back on this thing. Do a little bit of redneck suspension adjustment, just kind of getting it eyeballed. Well, actually, I think from when I had the car on the ground, I took a quick measurement and realized I can go back the other way. But yeah, we'll just do this up real crappy like. Alright, so now it is time to work on the nose cone of this car, or the bumper cover. So when I pulled this off, I was, some of the bolts were some of the nuts were super rusted. I couldn't really get it off, so I ended up cutting them out. I was very rough with it. I did not finesse it out in any way, shape, or form. So what I have to do is I have to fix the bumper cover now. So Ford, when they were putting this together, they used a two-sided bolt. So on one side it's a very coarse pitch, and on the other side it's I think it's a quarter 20. And so what I need to do is, you can kind of see that bolt is really broken, or that bolt is broken, like it snapped off. Actually, I think I cut that one out. So what I'm trying to do is cut the bottom side off of it, so that way I can you know, work it out and then get it all out. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drill quarter 20 hole in there. I'm gonna get some quarter 20 what's it called, just quarter 20 bar, cut it down into lengths, and then I will epoxy the quarter 20, I think cut them into 2 or 3 inch lengths into the bumper cover, and then that will be what I bolt onto the car. You'll kind of see as I go. It'll make a little bit more sense once I get a little bit further into this. right, now that I got that out, so that's the 1/4 20 all thread rod. I think that's what it's called, all thread. I don't remember, but it's just a rod that's fully threaded at 1/4 20. I can fit it in those holes, and then I'm just going to drill, clean up all those holes with a drill bit at 1/4 inch drill bits. And then I'll mix up some epoxy, put it in there. Well, actually, first I'll cut down that threaded rod into chunks, and then I will fill up the holes with epoxy, and then, put a chunk of threaded rod in there, and that is how I'm going to repair this front end. All right, so while all of that epoxy is curing, I'm going to move over. I'm just going to tighten some brake lines, make sure everything's tight and, not leaking, because again, I'm still having issues with the brakes. I think, air's getting into the system, so I'm just going to go through, make sure everything's nice and tight, and I'm not running into issues with, water getting in there, clean off all the fittings, and just, checking for leaks and whatnot. So again, just going around to all of the different brake connections and making sure they're all tight, they're not leaking, doing the best I can to make sure there's no air getting into this system, because I need the brakes to work. Pull all the wheels off again, and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again, expecting a different result. And I'm getting frustrated at this point, because as you can see, I have bled the brakes so many freaking times, so many different ways, and it's just not working. But everything's telling me that there's air getting into the system, which means it's a brake line somewhere or a fitting, one of the bleeders isn't working, so I'm just trying to make sure that I've got no air in the system. And you can see right here, I have an amazing amount of good clear fluid coming through this line. There is no air in there, so I can't understand how there's any air getting into the system. Same thing on the front. Open the bleeder, solid stream of fluid. It looks so good. I can't understand how air is getting into there and not coming out, but the brakes aren't working, so it's obviously something wrong. Well, the brakes have to be bled now, right? So let's get the wheels all back on. Now the wheels are back on. Let's fire this up. Let's check it out and let's see what we see. And we fire it up and same thing. The brakes just, you know, they work a little tiny bit and then they just sink to the floor. But I want to try it and see if the brakes hold. So you can see I've moved my other car up the driveway. So I'm just kind of, you know, taking the car out a little bit. And, you know, the brakes are holding. Like, that's the strange thing. The brakes are holding, but I also scraped the front of the intercooler there. You can see there's a big mark on the concrete where I dragged the intercooler, which I was not expecting. So grabbing a couple blocks of wood, throwing it under the wheels. That way I can roll the car back into the shop without dragging it. Yeah, it's always something with this car. Always something when you're building custom. Well, I kind of figured while I got the car outside, I might as well do a little bit of tuning on it so I can just run it outside without gassing myself out and just kind of, you know, work with it and, you know, make sure that it's running all right. And since I got the car out of the shop, there's no better time to do a little bit of sweeping than, you know, when the floor is kind of clear. course, the car's been in the shop for, you know, well, a lot of years, so it's filthy. It's got a ton of dust on it, so just cleaning the back window off a little bit and, you know, making it so I can kind of see through it. It's kind of exciting. Yeah, now that the car's back in the shop, we can kind of start getting the front end put together and see if we need to build any brackets or, you know, any sort of stuff like that. Also start checking clearance on the tires. We can start checking clearance on the air filter, make sure that's going to work like I need it to, and not interfere with the fender too much, all that good stuff. So as we're about to see with it as is, that fender does not install for shit. The filter really interferes with it, so I'm gonna have to modify this elbow. But that elbow is a problem for later. So as you can see, the intercooler is already on the ground. I guess I didn't realize that the camera had stopped recording for whatever reason when I pulled the intercooler off previously. But what I'm trying to do is flip this intercooler around to see if I can, you know, get it mounted higher up in the car. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, I wasn't able to get that working. Flipped around. So what I ended up doing is flipping it back to the way it originally was, and I modify my brackets very crudely to change the angle on the intercooler so it's tucked up a little bit more and it's as high up as I can. Ultimately, I think what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to get a intercooler that has the inlet and the outlet both on the bottom, and that will allow me to raise it up higher in the car and clear the tube front end. That's the issue that I run into right now, is when I try and get this higher in the car, the outlets or the inlet, depending on which side, hits the tube front end. And if I go even, like if I try and put the inlet on the top side of the tube front end, the intercooler interferes with the bumper cover. There's not that much space. So I think after the summer, I'm going to be building a new intercooler for this. But until then, right now I'm just modifying the intake tube. I'm just cutting a chunk out of it just to make sure that I can get the air cleaner in a reasonable spot. And we can see with that tube all bent up, I can actually get the fender on now, which is a huge achievement. So yeah, I've still got this flipped around right now. I'm trying to see if it'll work. It just really doesn't. Now this is probably mainly an issue with just getting out of my driveway, considering there's such an aggressive slope as soon as, you know, I leave the driveway. But I want to be able to get the car in and out of the driveway fairly easily, so I gotta, you know, do something here. So right now I'm putting the bumper cover in place because I want to be able to see how far up I can move this intercooler and where I can put it, how much space I have above, and you know, that sort of thing. then now we're going to flip it back around to the way it was originally, and I'm going to get working on modifying these brackets to fit a lot better. So I'm going to do what I've done a lot of times and use ratchet straps to hold everything up while I'm getting it in place and kind of getting it mocked up. Yeah, without modifying the intake pipes or the charge pipes, whatever you want to call them, I wasn't going to be able to flip the intercooler around the other way, just because having the left side inlet on the bottom, like the pipe wasn't long enough, and you know, it just wasn't going to work. So I had to flip this back around to the original way, and we're going to get it up and try and angle it back as much as we can and get it tucked up as out of the way as we can for now. We're just going to do what we can, and then we'll, as I said, I'll build another intercooler that, you know, is more custom and purpose built to the car later. So yeah, we're going to cut and modify the old brackets. They're going to look like crap, but as long as they work, I really don't care. So I cut a chunk off, and then, you know, I think I eventually end up welding a new piece, like kind of angled where I need it. And yeah, we just kind of bastardize it, but whatever. As long as it works, that's all that matters. Yeah, just look at how ugly these things are. But you know what? It holds it up there, so it doesn't matter. right here we get a very quick visit from Bliss. Oh, that's my baby girl. Alright, with the intercooler mounts redone, let's start working on getting these fenders back on the car. Real quickly take a second to torque all the wheels, because, you know, I don't want to take this out on the road and have any of the wheels fall off. So let's make sure we are at 85 foot-pounds of torque. So I kind of redid a little bit of the rockers on the bottom. So with the fender in place, I need to drill some holes through the metal that I put in there. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then I eventually have to open it up a bit more. So I take a carbide burr, because the drill bit, it can't really elongate a hole. So I need to use a carbide burr to do that. Next thing I need to do is put this cross brace in, and I realized that when I welded the tabs onto the bars, this is stupidly tight. Like, it should not be this hard to get that bar in. So I'm pretty sure when I welded the tabs on the front end, I welded them in the wrong place. So that is something I will have to fix later. It doesn't have to be fixed right this second, but it does have to be fixed. And we'll do the same thing to fit the driver's side fender, kind of get it in place, drill a hole on the bottom rocker for a nut and bolt, and so the front end's pretty much ready to go, but when I, put the epoxy on all of those studs, it kind of came up the threads a little bit, so a nut won't go all the way down. So I'm just going to take my 1/4 die, and I think I just do this by hand even. I just kind of thread it all the way down just to clean up the threads and get epoxy out of it as best I can, and then we can throw this on the car. Man, look at that. This is starting to look like a car again. We're getting there. We're making progress. This is a good thing. This is so freaking awesome. But funny enough, I had some issues with the clamp bolt interfering, so I had to actually pull the clamp off and readjust its positioning so it doesn't interfere with the front end. Yeah, this thing is really starting to look like a car again. But you know what's going to make it look even more like a car? A hood. Yeah, it is. So, I was putting the hood up and trying to clean up behind it, and it started sliding, and I just barely caught it, but I caught it. So yeah, so after we do a little bit of cleanup here, we're just going to flip this hood around and loosely lay it on the car. I'm just doing a little deburring from when I cut it out. But yeah, man, that is phenomenal. I have not seen the hood on this car since, you know, I did a bunch of the initial cutouts. But the throttle cable and throttle bracket are kind of getting in the way. So we're gonna need to figure that out because it's touching the cowl, so it's not really sitting properly. But man, that's starting to look nice. I am getting pretty freaking excited to get this car on the road. I'm not gonna lie. Like I can feel it. It's just gonna be any day now. Well, as you can see, the car does kind of run and drive. It kind of stops. The clutch kind of works. But I got the front end on. We've had the hood on. It looks pretty good. There are some things we still need to modify and fix. But that is all the time we have for this one. So as always, if you stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing. And we'll catch you in the next one.